Eleanor Jackson stepped through the gleaming doors of Nova Luxury Hovercrafts. The bright lights inside made her blink. She was 80 years old, but she stood tall and straight. Her dark skin had lines that showed her years of hard work and wisdom. She held her ID chip tightly in her hand. The showroom was clean and shiny. New T9000 hovercrafts sat in neat rows. Their metal bodies gleamed under the lights. Eleanor looked at them with knowing eyes. She had helped create the science that made these vehicles fly. Mr. Kim saw her enter. He was the sales manager, wearing an expensive suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He walked over to Eleanor, looking down at her simple clothes. "Can I help you find your way, ma'am?" "The community center is 3 blocks east," he said. His voice was loud and slow, as if talking to someone who couldn't understand. Several other salespeople watched from behind their desks. One of them whispered something, and another laughed softly. Eleanor didn't show any anger. She had faced this kind of treatment many times in her long life. She smiled politely at Mr. Kim. "I'm interested in purchasing a T9000 with the enhanced gravitational stabilizers," she said clearly. Mr. Kim's eyebrows went up. He looked back at his co-workers with a small smirk. They thought it was funny that this old woman was talking about advanced technology. "The T9000 is very expensive," Mr. Kim said slowly. "Perhaps I can show you something more suitable for your needs." Eleanor nodded. "I understand the cost. I'm particularly interested in the model with the quantum drive modifications." Mr. Kim laughed now, not trying to hide it. "Those are technical terms, ma'am. Maybe you heard your grandson talk about them?" In the corner of the showroom, Mr. Park watched everything. He was younger than the other salespeople. He had come to Earth from the Centauri star system 5 years ago. His people had different ways. They believed elders were to be respected above all others. The older someone was, the more knowledge they carried. Watching his co-workers laugh at this elderly woman made him uncomfortable. Eleanor walked past Mr. Kim to one of the hovercrafts. She ran her hand along its smooth side. "This model still has the problem with the flux stabilizers in high atmosphere conditions, doesn't it?" she asked. Mr. Kim followed her. "Ma'am, these are very complicated machines. Perhaps you'd like to sit down while I get you some water?" Another salesperson called out. "Maybe she wants to buy it for her rich son." More laughter filled the showroom. Mr. Park stepped forward. He couldn't watch this anymore. "May I help you, ma'am?" he asked, bowing slightly as was the custom of his people when addressing an elder. Eleanor turned to him with grateful eyes. "Yes, thank you. I'd like to see the technical specifications for this model." Mr. Park nodded and pulled up the information on his tablet. He handed it to Eleanor, who studied it carefully. "Just as I thought," she said. "They still haven't fixed the radiation shielding issue." Mr. Park looked surprised. "You understand the technical details?" "I should hope so," Eleanor said with a small smile. "I designed the original system." Mr. Kim snorted. "Of course you did, ma'am, and I'm the Emperor of Mars." Mr. Park frowned at his boss. Then he looked more closely at Eleanor. Something about her seemed familiar. "May I ask your full name?" he asked. "Dr. Eleanor Jackson," she replied. Mr. Park's eyes widened. He quickly checked something on his tablet. Then he looked up at Eleanor with new understanding. "Dr. Jackson, it's an honor to meet you," he said, his voice filled with respect. "Your work on gravity manipulation made these vehicles possible." The showroom grew quiet. Mr. Kim stopped smiling. "I would be happy to show you our best models," Mr. Park continued. "We just received the new T9000 Quantum series yesterday. It has the enhanced stabilizers you mentioned." Eleanor nodded. "That sounds perfect." As Mr. Park led her toward the back of the showroom, the other salespeople whispered among themselves. Mr. Kim stood frozen, his face turning red. Sometimes respect came too late, Eleanor thought, but she had learned long ago not to wait for it. She walked with dignity past the people who had laughed at her, following Mr. Park to see the hovercraft she would buy. Mr. Park led Eleanor to the newest T9000 model at the back of the showroom. The vehicle floated 6 inches above the floor, humming softly. Its sleek black surface reflected the lights from above. Eleanor walked slowly around it, examining every detail with careful eyes. "This is our premium model," Mr. Park explained. "It has all the latest features." Eleanor bent down to look underneath the craft. And the quantum stabilizers, have they fixed the alignment issue? Mr. Kim had followed them. He couldn't believe this old woman was still pretending to understand the technology. He stepped forward, eager to take control of the situation. "Madam," he said with a forced smile, "perhaps you'd like me to explain how the basic controls work. This button turns it on, this one makes it go up." Eleanor straightened up and looked at the control panel inside the vehicle. She pointed to a small blue switch. The quantum flux capacitors in last year's model had a tendency to degrade in high radiation environments, she commented, running her fingers along the vehicle's control panel. "Has that been addressed in this version?" Mr. Kim laughed openly now. Some of the other salespeople had gathered around to watch. "Perhaps you're confused about what these buttons actually do," Mr. Kim said loudly. "This isn't a washing machine." "Madam." The other salespeople laughed along with him, all except Mr. Park, who was watching Eleanor closely. There was something about the way she spoke, the confidence in her words. She didn't seem bothered by their laughter at all. "I would like to register for a test drive," Eleanor said calmly to Mr. Park. "Of course," he replied. "I'll need to scan your identification." Eleanor handed him her ID chip. Mr. Park placed it on his tablet scanner. Standard procedure required the scanning of every customer's identification before a test drive. The information would appear on his retinal display, a small screen only he could see inside his right eye. As the data loaded, Mr. Park's expression changed. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. He looked up at Eleanor, then back at his display, then at Eleanor again. "Is everything in order?" Eleanor asked. "Dr. Jackson," he said with sudden reverence, his voice trembling slightly, "your work on non-Newtonian propulsion systems is the foundation of our entire industry." Mr. Kim stopped laughing. The other salespeople grew quiet. "What are you talking about, Park?" Mr. Kim asked. Before Mr. Park could answer, the dealership's AI system activated. A soft blue light filled the room. The computer's voice came through speakers in the ceiling. "Priority protocol engaged," announced the AI in a clear voice. "Welcome, Dr. Eleanor Jackson, recipient of the Galactic Science Medal and pioneer of deep space communications." Now everyone was staring at Eleanor. Mr. Kim's face had turned pale. "Dr. Eleanor Jackson," one of the salespeople whispered. "The Eleanor Jackson? The one who invented the gravity displacement theory?" another asked. "The same," Mr. Park said, still looking at Eleanor with awe. Her work made hover technology possible. Without her research, none of these vehicles would exist. Mr. Kim stepped forward, his earlier confidence gone. "Dr. Jackson, I had no idea." Eleanor raised her hand to stop him. "No need for explanations, Mr. Kim. I'm used to people judging by appearances." Just then, Eleanor's communication device made a loud beeping sound. She pulled it from her pocket. The small screen showed an urgent message marked with the red symbol of Earth Command. "I need to take this," she said, stepping away from the group. The salespeople watched as she read the message. Her face grew serious. She pressed a button on the device and spoke quietly. "This is Dr. Jackson." "Yes, I understand. I'll be there right away." She turned back to the group. "I'm afraid I'll have to postpone the test drive. Something urgent has come up." "Is everything all right?" Mr. Park asked. "I'm not sure," Eleanor replied. "But I need to get to the command center immediately." Mr. Kim, trying to recover from his embarrassment, stepped forward quickly. "Please, Dr. Jackson, allow me to arrange transportation for you." "That won't be necessary," Eleanor said. "They're sending someone to pick me up." As if on cue, the large windows at the front of the showroom lit up with flashing blue lights. A sleek black vehicle had landed in the street outside. An official, "Earth Command Transport." "It appears my ride is here," Eleanor said. She turned to Mr. Park. "Thank you for your assistance. I'll return another day." As Eleanor walked toward the exit, the salespeople moved aside, making a path for her. Mr. Kim looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Just before she reached the door, Eleanor turned back to look at him. "And Mr. Kim, the community center is actually 4 blocks east, not 3. With that, she stepped outside and into the waiting transport, leaving behind a showroom full of stunned faces. Remember to cite sources using tags if your response relies on information from web search or web fetch. Results. Eleanor had just reached the door of the showroom when it suddenly slid open. She stepped back in surprise. 3 people rushed in. At the front was a woman in a crisp uniform with official markings. Behind her were 2 security officers in dark suits. The woman's face was serious. Her name was Ms. Lee, and she was the colony governor. Everyone knew her face from the news. The security officers scanned the room quickly, their hands near their weapons. "We have a situation," Ms. Lee announced, her eyes finding Eleanor immediately. "Dr. Jackson, we need you immediately." The salespeople stared in shock. Mr. Kim stood frozen, his mouth open, but no words coming out. Just minutes ago, he had been making fun of this elderly woman. Now the colony governor herself had come looking for her. "Governor Lee," Eleanor said with a nod, "I just received the alert." Ms. Lee looked relieved to see Eleanor. "Thank goodness we found you. The transport outside is ready." Eleanor turned to Mr. Park. "I'm afraid I must go." "Of course, Dr. Jackson," Mr. Park said, bowing slightly. Ms. Lee was already moving toward the door, her steps quick and urgent. "We don't have much time." As they walked briskly toward the exit, Ms. Lee explained the situation. The security officers walked on either side of them, keeping watch. "The orbital defense grid is failing," she said in a low voice. "The primary quantum matrix is destabilizing in a pattern we've never seen. The defense grid was a network of satellites that protected the colony from space debris and other threats. If it failed completely, the colony would be in danger." Eleanor nodded calmly. "It's the solar flare interference pattern. I warned about this vulnerability 20 years ago." Ms. Lee looked at her with surprise. "You predicted this?" "I submitted a report to the Science Council in 2055, Eleanor explained. "They dismissed my concerns, said the probability was too low to worry about." They reached the door. The security officers went out first, checking that it was safe. Inside the showroom, the salespeople had gathered in a group, watching in amazement. Mr. Kim still hadn't moved from his spot. "Who is she, really?" one of them whispered. Mr. Park shook his head. "Dr. Eleanor Jackson is one of the greatest scientists of our time. She developed the theories that make all our modern transportation possible. And we treated her like she was nobody," another salesperson said quietly. Outside, a large transport vehicle waited. Its engines hummed loudly. The side door opened as Eleanor approached. "Dr. Jackson," one of the security officers said, "please." "Watch your step." He offered his hand to help her into the vehicle. Eleanor took it and climbed aboard with ease. Ms. Lee followed her inside. Just before the door closed, Eleanor looked back at the dealership. Through the glass windows, she could see the staff watching her. Their faces showed shock and respect. Mr. Kim had finally moved. He was walking toward the window, his expression full of regret. The door slid shut. The transport lifted off the ground quickly. In seconds, they were flying above the city. Inside the vehicle, Ms. Lee handed Eleanor a tablet. The screen showed a complex diagram of the orbital defense grid. Several sections were flashing red. "The problem started 3 hours ago," Ms. Lee explained. "At first it was just minor fluctuations in the power grid. Then 2 satellites went offline. Now the whole system is becoming unstable." Eleanor studied the diagram carefully. "The pattern matches exactly what I predicted. The solar flares from our sun are creating a unique radiation pattern. It's interfering with the quantum communications between the satellites." Ms. Lee looked worried. "Our engineers say the whole grid could collapse within the hour. If that happens..." She didn't finish her sentence. She didn't need to. They both knew what would happen if the defense grid failed. The colony would be exposed to dangerous space radiation and debris. Thousands of people could die. "I'll need access to the main control systems," Eleanor said. "You'll have whatever you need," Ms. Lee assured her. "The best engineers are already working on the problem." The transport sped toward the command center, a tall building in the center of the colony. Eleanor continued studying the data on the tablet. "Your report from 20 years ago," Ms. Lee said quietly. "Did it include a solution?" Eleanor nodded. "It did, but it will require making changes to the core programming of the grid. It won't be easy." The transport began to descend toward the landing pad on top of the command center. Below them, the colony stretched out in all directions. People were going about their day, unaware of the danger above them. "Dr. Jackson," Ms. Lee said, "on behalf Of everyone in this colony, I apologize for not taking your warnings seriously 20 years ago. Eleanor smiled slightly. Apologies won't fix the grid, Governor, but recognizing the problem now is a start. The transport landed with a gentle bump. The door slid open, revealing a group of anxious-looking engineers waiting for them. Dr. Eleanor Jackson is here, Ms. Lee announced as they stepped out. She knows what's happening and how to fix it. The engineers looked at Eleanor with hope in their eyes. Today they wouldn't judge her by her age or appearance. Today they needed her wisdom more than ever. The command center was a large room filled with flashing lights and busy people. In the middle stood a round table with a glowing map floating above it. The map showed the colony and the space around it. Red warning lights blinked all over the map. Engineers ran from one screen to another. Their voices were loud and scared. They typed fast on their computers trying to fix the problem, but nothing was working. Eleanor walked into this chaos calmly. Ms. Lee led her to the center table where a man was shouting orders. "Chief Engineer Bay," Ms. Lee said. "This is Dr. Eleanor Jackson." Mr. Bay turned around. He was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and messy hair. Sweat ran down his face. "Dr. Jackson," he said quickly, "thank you for coming. We're in big trouble." He waved his hand over the map. The image changed to show a complex network of connected dots. Many of the dots were red or yellow. "Every override attempt has failed," Mr. Bay explained, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. "We've tried rebooting the system. We've tried bypassing the damaged sections. Nothing works. The whole grid is failing." Eleanor looked carefully at the map. She walked slowly around the table, studying the pattern of blinking lights. Everyone in the room became quiet, watching her. "How much time do we have?" she asked. Mr. Bay checked his watch. 38 minutes before complete failure. Then we lose all protection." Eleanor nodded. She pointed to a part of the map. "Let me see the radiation patterns from the solar flares." Mr. Bay typed on his tablet. A new layer appeared on the map, showing waves of energy coming from the sun. "Interesting," Eleanor said. She looked at the waves for a long time. Then she smiled. Slightly. "I need a terminal." Mr. Bay led her to a computer station. Eleanor sat down and began typing. Her old fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. On the big map, new patterns began to appear. Green lines formed between the red dots. "What are you doing?" Mr. Bay asked, leaning over her shoulder. "The solution isn't to fight the interference," Eleanor said, her fingers flying across the terminal. "We need to incorporate it into the defense pattern." The other engineers looked confused. One of them, not from Earth, whispered to another, "What does she mean?" Mr. Bay shook his head. "Dr. Jackson, with all respect, we've tried everything. The solar flares are too strong. They're destroying our communications." Eleanor didn't stop typing. "You're thinking about this the wrong way. The solar energy isn't just a problem, it's also power. Free power." She pressed a final button. On the big map, something changed. The red dots started turning yellow, then green. "What did you do?" Ms. Lee asked, stepping closer. "I rewrote the basic operating system," Eleanor explained. "Instead of trying to block the solar radiation, we're now using it. The satellites are absorbing the energy and using it to strengthen their shields." Mr. Bay stared at the map in disbelief. "But that's not possible. The radiation patterns are random." "Not random," Eleanor corrected him. "Complex. There's a pattern, but it's hard to see." She pointed to the screen. "Look here and here. The wave frequencies match our system's natural resonance. By adjusting our shields to vibrate at exactly the opposite frequency, we create a harmony instead of interference." The alien engineers in the room exchanged confused glances. One of them raised a hand. "But how did you know this would work? There's no formula for this in our textbooks." Eleanor smiled. "Human intuition," she explained. "Sometimes the obstacle is the way. What seems like a problem can become the solution if you look at it differently." The engineers gathered around her computer, asking questions and taking notes. On the big map, all the dots were turning green now. The defense grid was getting stronger, not weaker. Ms. Lee watched from a few steps away. She smiled with relief. Then she walked over to Eleanor, who was explaining her solution to the eager engineers. "Dr. Jackson," Ms. Lee said quietly, "may I speak with you privately?" Eleanor nodded and stood up. They walked to a quiet corner of the room. "That was remarkable," Ms. Lee said. "You saved a lot of lives today." "The solution was always there," Eleanor replied. "Sometimes we need to look at old problems with new eyes." Ms. Lee nodded. "I have a question that's been bothering me. What were you doing at that dealership today? It seems like an odd coincidence." "Not a coincidence at all," Eleanor said. "I understand you were at the dealership to purchase vehicles for the new research initiative." "A fleet of 10, to be precise," Eleanor confirmed. "The Nova T-9000s have the power capacity we need for the Deep Space Communication Project." Ms. Lee looked surprised. "The Deep Space Project? But that's not supposed to start for another 6 months." "I convinced the Science Council to move up the timeline," Eleanor explained. "After today's events, I think you can see why. Our communication systems need upgrading before the next solar cycle." Ms. Lee nodded slowly. "And you chose to go to the dealership yourself. Why not send an assistant?" Eleanor smiled. "I like to see things with my own eyes before making decisions. And sometimes," she paused, "sometimes it's good for people to learn not to judge by appearances." Ms. Lee laughed softly. "I wish I could have seen their faces when they realized who you were." "It was educational for everyone involved," Eleanor said. She looked back at the big map, now glowing with healthy green lights. "Now shall we finish securing the grid? There's still work to be done." They walked back to the center of the room, where the engineers were already implementing Eleanor's solution across the entire system. The crisis was ending, but Eleanor's work was just beginning. The next morning, the doors of Nova luxury hovercrafts slid open. Eleanor Jackson walked in, wearing a simple blue suit. The showroom was quiet. Only a few salespeople were there, and they all turned to look when she entered. Mr. Park hurried over from his desk. He smiled widely and bowed slightly. "Dr. Jackson, welcome back. We've been expecting you." The other salespeople stood up straight. They looked nervous. News about yesterday's events had spread quickly through the colony. Everyone now knew how Dr. Eleanor Jackson had saved the defense grid, and everyone knew how she had been treated at this dealership before that. "Good morning, Mr. Park," Eleanor said. "I hope you have good news about those vehicles I was interested in." "Yes, of course, we've prepared everything. The T-9000 models with your requested modifications are ready for inspection." As Mr. Park led Eleanor toward the back of the showroom, Mr. Kim stepped out from his office. He looked like he hadn't slept much. His hair was not as neat as usual, and his eyes were tired. "Dr. Jackson," he said, walking toward her. His voice was different now, soft and respectful. "About yesterday." Eleanor raised her hand to stop him. She didn't want to hear his apology. It didn't matter anymore. "I'll be purchasing 10 T-9000s. With the modifications I specified," she said firmly. "Mr. Park will handle the transaction." Mr. Kim opened his mouth, then closed it again. He nodded slowly. "Of course, Dr. Jackson. Whatever you need." He stepped back, watching as Mr. Park led Eleanor to the waiting vehicles. The 10 hovercrafts were lined up perfectly, their black surfaces shining under the lights. Each one had been modified according to Eleanor's specifications. Mr. Park showed her the changes. "We upgraded the radiation shielding as you requested, and the communication systems have been enhanced for deep space transmissions." Eleanor walked along the line, checking each vehicle carefully. She nodded with satisfaction. "They'll do nicely," she said. "The research team will be pleased." As they completed the paperwork for the purchase, other customers came into the showroom. They whispered and pointed when they saw Eleanor. One young boy tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, that's her, the scientist from the news." Eleanor pretended not to hear. She signed the final document and handed it to Mr. Park. "The vehicles will be delivered to the research center tomorrow," she said. "It's been an honor doing business with you, Dr. Jackson," Mr. Park replied. As Eleanor turned to leave, Mr. Kim stepped forward once more. "Dr. Jackson," he said, "I just want to say thank you for what you did for the colony yesterday." Eleanor looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once and walked out of the showroom, her head held high. 3 months passed. The colony had changed in that time. The story of Eleanor Jackson and how she saved the defense grid had inspired many people. Young students were showing new interest in science and engineering. The government had increased funding for research programs, and, at the edge of the colony, a new building stood tall and proud. The Deep Space Research Center had finally opened. Its purpose was to develop better ways to communicate with Earth and other colonies across the galaxy. Inside the main hall of the center, a special ceremony was taking place. 50 young engineers sat in rows, listening carefully. They came from different backgrounds. Some were human, others were from different planets. But they all shared a passion for learning and discovery. At the front of the hall stood Eleanor Jackson. At 80, she was the oldest person in the room, but her mind was sharper than ever. The young engineers watched her with respect and admiration. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in our colony's history," Eleanor said. "With these new, deep space communication systems, we will connect with worlds we've only dreamed of reaching." She looked at the eager faces before her. "Many of you have asked why I chose you for this program. You are all different ages, from different places. Some of you have fancy degrees, others learned through experience." Eleanor smiled. "I chose you because each of you sees the world in a unique way. Innovation isn't about your age, your appearance, or what others expect of you. It's about seeing patterns others miss." The young engineers nodded, some taking notes, others simply listening. "Yesterday's problems often contain tomorrow's solutions," Eleanor continued. "Remember that when you face challenges that seem impossible." After the ceremony, Eleanor led the group outside. The bright sun made them shield their eyes for a moment. In front of the building, 10 gleaming T-9000 hovercrafts were parked in a perfect line. They had been painted with the center's colors, blue and silver. On the side of each vehicle, words were written in bold letters: "Wisdom leads the way, Vicar." First mission would leave tomorrow. The team would travel to the outer edge of the solar system, testing Eleanor's new communication system along the way. As the young engineers inspected the vehicles, Eleanor watched with satisfaction. She had faced many challenges in her long life. People had judged her, dismissed her, and underestimated her, but she had never let that stop her. Now her wisdom would guide a new generation to the stars. And perhaps they would remember not to judge others by their appearance, but by the brightness of their minds and the strength of their ideas. Eleanor smiled as the sun glinted off the hovercrafts. Her legacy was not just in the machines she had helped create, but in the minds she had helped to open.